And welcome to this series. And I'm joined here by the amazing Linda Ward. And Linda and me, I met Linda on LinkedIn. I've came across some of her articles, really, really interesting, her approach. And as part of this retail growth series, Linda has a different way of looking at retail sustainability and renewal. And just a little bit about Linda then. So Linda is the person behind Retail Renewal, and she's a lifetime of business experience. She's worked at companies ranging for large multinationals, at Marks and Spencer's, Debenhams, and right across to solo entrepreneur retailers. Linda believes there's simple changes in every business, and they can be more profitable and sustainable and reduce its carbon footprint. So it's not just for those big retailers; it's for those small solo retailers as well that can be done in. She's 17 years at Marks and Spencer's in the UK, Europe and Ireland, and it was her responsibility over that store development and the new stores that was brought into the Irish market. She's also part of the project team who set up the first Debenhams store in Ireland, so she can see she's a lot of experience for a lot of years and working with a lot of different organisations and businesses. Since 2008, she's served as a secretary and coordinator of the Irish Charity Shops Association, and they have 40 members and 450 stores nationwide. So you can imagine that she has that unique perspective as well from the charity sector, and a lot of stores there under her belt. So Linda has always had a lifelong interest in the environment and sustainability, and the recent global developments have given her this renewed urgency to really look at sustainability in businesses. Her background is she's qualified in sustainability management, and she's also an associate member of CIPD, and she does a lot of trainings and a lot of workshops, and she works with Retail Skills Net Ireland as well, and various other organisations in applying this knowledge. Linda believes this can be easily turned into a really green approach, and really looking at it not as a tick the box exercise, but looking at it as more of a long sustainable approach. We had a really interesting chat before we came on today, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that now, Linda. And Linda, so Green Zebra is your amazing business that you've started. Tell us a little bit about that and what it is the Green Zebra, I suppose, are doing, or their vision, and what the retail piece is going to be in that business.
Well, thanks, Louise, and I'm really delighted to be here. I suppose Green Zebra really came out of about 12 years ago now. I set up my own business, my own company as a retail consultant. I got involved in the charity shop sector, as you outlined there, and those sort of two worlds were sort of very separate. And then I sort of realised that actually there were lots of similarities between the approaches that were needed between the charity retail sector and the commercial retail sector. And then, as I said, I had this light bulb moment in 2019 when I realised that, I'd started to learn more about sustainability, and I realized that people don't know what they don't know, and that really I had this lifetime of business experience. I then overlaid that with the knowledge of sustainability and how to run a sustainable business, and thought, well, why don't I just put the two together? So that's really where Green Zebra came from. So Green Zebra builds greener businesses. We're really on a mission to make SMEs go green, I suppose, is in really simple terms, is what we're trying to do. And it's really about encouraging companies to look at what they're doing at the moment, to see the good things that they're doing that they maybe don't even realize that they're doing, that is contributing to their sustainability, and then look at what things they can do to improve that, and how small steps can lead to bigger things. And that, people, you use the word like sustainability strategy, and people sort of go, that sounds too scary and too big. And yeah, it is big, but any strategy is made up of putting lots and lots of small bits together. So you look at all the various elements that are going to make up that sustainability strategy, and you start with them, and then in the end you end up with a sustainability strategy. And one of the things we've developed in Green Zebra is an 8-pillar program which enables you to do that. So there are 7 sort of areas that we look at around sustainability, and you put together a strategy for each of those areas. And those areas are energy, waste, water, supply chain, transport, biodiversity, and people. So you take those 7 elements of running any business and you put together a strategy for each of those, and then you can come up with an overall strategy. Because the IPCC report's coming out later on today, and what that's going to say is stop consuming fossil fuels, stop chucking greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, because that's how we're going to get global warming, and the Earth's not going to be habitable by the end of this century. So it's really, and I'm sort of simplifying it to make a point. And obviously the IPCC report will be a lot longer than that, but that's essentially what it's going to say. So it's incumbent on everybody, as an individual, as a consumer, and as a business person, to make their contribution to that. And so it's reducing your carbon footprint, reducing the amount of greenhouse gases we're chucking up into the atmosphere. That's really what everybody's got to do. And business has got a really big responsibility for that as well.
Really interesting. I think what you touched on there was that I suppose there is 7 pillars within your system. How do you assess, or how do you see kind of where that is? Do you do like a little self-audit with those retailers? How do you assess where their needs are, where they're at with that sustainability piece?
Well, it's really we've developed a Green Zebra audit, which is actually a free tool that's on our website, and that takes each of those 7 pillars and the 8 pillars, including the strategy pillar, and that really it asks questions of you as a business. It's more of a checklist than an audit, really. So here's biodiversity. Do you do this, this, and this? So it's really just a questioning people and getting them to start thinking about it. Once somebody's done the audit and thought, oh yeah, I've actually got a few things in place there, for example, under the people subject potentially, or energy, but then when it comes to biodiversity, I'm not doing anything. So we would encourage people then to really, we've got a whole load of resources on our website which has got which people can go in and start to find out a bit more. So if you want to find out a bit more about diversity, go onto the website. On the website, we've got a what is it, where to start, and a case study. So there's some basic information about that subject on the website. Once you've had a look at that, you think, actually, I might want to go a bit further with this. I might want to actually try and find out a bit more about this. And then we would encourage people to come onto the Green Zebra membership program that we've got, whereby we run a series of 8 workshops, 8 1.5-hour workshops over 8 months, and then that really then looks at each subject in a bit more detail, and then we'll give you practical tools as to how you can improve your sustainability in that area. So, for example, we've just launched the first set of workshops, which started last month, and we did energy as the first one. So in that workshop, everybody came along with their energy bills. We gave them a simple spreadsheet they could use to fill out, to work out what their energy bills were in total in kilowatt hours for the year, taking a baseline year, which we've taken as 2019, because obviously that's pre-pandemic, and then work out what your greenhouse gas emissions are from that. You can work out what your greenhouse gas emissions are from the energy that you use in your business. And then you can then start looking at it and saying, right, okay, so how can I reduce this? So not only is it going to make you more sustainable, it's also going to save you money, because if you reduce your energy costs, as we all know at the moment, the costs are going through the roof. That's going to help you there. So it's really looking at what you're doing now and then breaking it down into practical steps that you can take to actually improve the efficiency and sustainability of your business.
It's really good, and I think it's a really great way. I think you touched on earlier, it's little things you can do, little building blocks. That's really interesting. Now, before we went on, we had a brief conversation. We were talking about how to retain staff, and some people might say, what has staff retention got to do with sustainability? Like, what is one for the other? But what is really interesting, I think we alluded to this earlier, is that there is a workforce coming to the market at the moment, the Gen Z workforce, that are really, really looking at that sustainability in businesses, and they want to know where things are coming from. And they're really looking at ethical products, and are they ethically made? Talk to me a little bit about that, and where you see, I suppose, retailers retaining staff, and even maybe even bringing staff in because they have that in the right place where it should be.
Well, I think, to retain the staff of the future, you're going to have a lot more holistic approach to the way in which you recruit and retain people. And it's actually no longer, well, it never really was, to be honest, about how much you pay them. Like people, I would always maintain throughout my whole career, people actually go out to work for the money, but they don't stay in a job for the money.
Yeah.
So yes, everybody goes out to work because they need to earn money, but that's a really simplistic way of looking at it. And people stay in a job. People work for people. They don't work for organizations. So people stay in a job because it's somewhere that they feel comfortable. It's somewhere where they feel valued. It's somewhere where they feel that their contribution is being valued, and that it's somewhere where they're comfortable to go every day to work. And I mean, I can honestly say that hasn't always been the case in my career. I've had lots of times when I've dreaded going to work because of the toxic nature of the workplace, that retail used to be. But that you won't get away with that anymore. People won't accept that level of difficulty in their day-to-day working. So just to bring it back to today, so to look at how you can create your workplace as somewhere where people actually want to come to work, and that does involve sustainability now. 50% of if you look at the Gen Z, for example, that you talked about there, Deloitte do a really good consumer behavior study every year, and the study that they did for 2021, Gen Z are adopting more sustainable behaviors than any other group. And 50% of the people in that group are actually reducing how much they buy, and 45% of people in that group have stopped buying stuff because it's not ethical or sustainable. So you translate that into the workforce, they're then going to come along and say, okay, so I want to go and work for X company, so I'm going to start looking at how do they treat their people. Have they got a diversity and inclusion policy? Is there flexible working? What's their attitude to equality and equity? So they're going to want to start looking at these sort of things and making sure that the workplace that they're going to be working in reflects their current values.
Yeah, I think that's I think I seen it anyways myself working in retail. I seen over definitely the last 3 to 4 years, there was a huge shift in customers coming into stores and asking where it's made. So they would walk over to the product and they would say, is it made here? And sometimes where the confusion would be is that it might be packaged in Europe, and it might say that it's in Europe, but it doesn't mean it was made in Europe. So that's where there would be a little bit of a confusion there, because it might say it's made in Europe, but it might necessarily, that very generalized term wouldn't mean it was actually made in Europe. It might be made in China, and it might have been packaged in Europe. So kind of things like that. Have you come across that the consumers are actually find it difficult to actually differentiate where things are sourced or where they're ethical?
Well, and I think the benefit that the consumers have today is that we've all got these things in our hands. We've all got a little computer in our hands now. So you go into a shop, you look at a product, you can search for it, you can find out more about it. And you can also find out what the company's not telling you about it. Like if a company is not being transparent about where it came from, or what the component parts of it are, or where is the lithium produced that goes into your mobile phone, and is that being mined by 13-year-old boys in South Africa? Like, do you know what I mean? Like if they're not being honest about where the materials are coming from that go into that product, you can find out about it now. And I think this gives consumers huge power to actually demand of retailers and demand of people who are providing the goods for them that they do know where they come from, and they do know who made them, and they know how much those people were paid. And so I think it really is. I think it's a great sort of development in a way, is that power is going back to consumers, but consumers need to wield that power, and retailers need to understand that consumers are wielding that power, and instead of resenting it or seeing it as a negative thing, they should be turning it round and making it into a positive thing. And how can I respond to this? So maybe as a retailer, I need to start looking at my supply chain now. I need to start looking at asking questions of my suppliers. And if I don't get the answers that I like, then maybe I need to think about moving to a different supplier. And that might mean nearshoring it, which is the opposite of offshoring. I mean, that's what was done in the 90s and the noughties, was everything went over to Vietnam and Thailand, and China is the biggest producer of fast fashion. It's not Bangladesh or whatever people think very often, and now it's being brought back. It's now being nearshored. It's being brought back into somewhere where it is nearer, partly because of the oil crisis, and partly because of the Evergrande, and all sorts of things have contributed to that supply chain wanting to be made shorter. But like, the nearer it becomes, then the more transparent that supply chain is likely to be. It might, if you're producing something in Europe as opposed to producing it in the Far East, it may be that the cost of that production is going to be slightly higher, and the goods that you're producing are going to be slightly more expensive. But explain that to your customers. Explain why you're changing and what the benefits of that are, because there's not just the economic cost of what you're buying, there's the environmental and the social cost. So if it's being produced nearer to your market, and yet the people that are making it are being paid a living wage, or certainly a minimum wage, then that's a good thing. And if that makes the goods slightly more expensive, then maybe as a consumer, we've got to be prepared to accept that. And then, of course, there's the environmental cost. If something is being produced nearer to where the market is, then the transportation costs are going to be less, and there's lots of other things that are going to knit into that are going to reduce the carbon footprint of it as well.
Do you have any examples? I suppose there might be people listening that are in that sector that have a small retail outlet, and they're trying to see where the benefits, I suppose, or examples of where you've seen maybe smaller retailers really I suppose successes out of implementing those strategies you're talking about. If you can share any stories, I think, so people can maybe get an idea of what that looks like from a day-to-day perspective.
I think it's more, it's about changing your perspective from just looking at price and looking at your products from a more holistic point of view, and I mean, in terms of coming up with specific examples of people that have done this, I'm just racking my brains now. I could have prepared this, but anyway, just racking my brains to try and think of what that is. But I think it's more about shifting the mindset from, I've got to produce everything as cheaply as possible because that's what people want. What I'm trying to say is, don't assume that isn't necessarily what people do want now. And that if you're open about, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Like, if something is really cheap, then you would ask yourself, why is that the case? And so I think it's more about changing your sort of perspective to look at the value of what you're producing in three ways as opposed to one way. So you're looking at the environmental, the social, and the economic, and the financial, the economic cost or value of what you're selling, And yes, I know that's a difficult message for people to hear, especially at the moment when, energy prices are increasing by 25 and 30%. But I think if we're going to have a sustainable planet in the longer term, I think that's the way in which we have to think. And also that's the way consumers are thinking. So if that's the way your customers are thinking, then that's the way that you've got to think as a retailer.
I think a lot of retailers are using refillables. There's kind of a shift in the cosmetic sector where, we're seeing a lot of stores now getting fitted with refillable containers. So they're going back into that store with their container and they're having the refills there. And I can see that shift already in the cosmetics industry, and where a lot of stores are doing that, and they're, the customer can come in and do it themselves. And there's a lot of even healthy eating stores that are doing that as well. And exactly, it's nice to see that bit of a shift there and putting a bit of a focus on that. And some retailers even they're allowing you to bring back your old jeans and putting that back, and you get a whatever 10-15% off your next purchase. But that they're showing that we're not just chucking them out, we're actually using this to recycle those jeans again. So there is things out there, I think, that we can be creative in the approach that we can make, definitely at a daily level or at a local level. And I know even in New York, I think it was in Macy's in New York, they filled a window with old clothes in it, and it was half filled, and it was all old clothes. And on the top of that window it had this is the impact you're having on the environment. And it was to showcase again that that clothing world were really disposable clothing, and they had a clothing line in there that was a sustainability clothing line. And we're starting to see that now a lot more, brands bringing in clothing lines, and it really is I'm seeing that word everywhere, sustainability, a lot in retailers. I suppose, how do we know, how as a consumer, how do I know how sustainable a brand is if I go in? And I know you talked about earlier about different fabrics, so you can look at what fabrics are in it. And I think you're talking about a top you had that was linen and different things like that. So I found that really interesting, because I was 10 years in clothing, but again, I wouldn't have looked at that as a consumer. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's quite interesting for people to know that side of it. Yeah.
Well, I think as a consumer, it's actually quite difficult, because retailers don't actually make it very easy for you to do that. But I suppose if you look at it from a sort of principle point of view, anything that is a composite fabric is really difficult to reuse and make into something else. At the moment, only 1% of the clothing that's actually made in the world is then recycled. So that what they call garment to garment recycling, i.e. the garments are taken, they're broken down, and they're made into new garments. And your example of the jeans is a very good one. And actually denim is one of the most easily recyclable fabrics, because it's generally 100% cotton. And because it's 100% cotton, it can then be broken down, and the fibers can be literally broken down, and they can be rewoven into new fabric and make new jeans out of them. And there's a really good company in the Netherlands called Mud Jeans, which actually you can buy in Dublin. There's a couple of retailers in Temple Bar that sell them. And they do exactly that, and they've been around for about 10 years or so. And so you can actually rent jeans from them, and you can return the jeans to them at the end of their life, and they will make them into new jeans. But that, as I stress, is only 1% of the clothing that's actually produced. So from a point of view of consumer, is that I would try and look for something that's 100% of something. Like I was telling you about my linen top. I was delighted last year to find this 100% linen top in a sale, which was even better. And I wonder why it was in the sale. And because it's 100% linen and it creases. But that fabric will eventually rot and decompose. So like when it comes to the very end of that life of that fabric, after I've used it, I've passed it on to somebody else, it's been made into another garment, it's had lots and lots of lives as a garment, eventually when it falls apart, that fabric will rot and go into the soil and become part of the biodiversity. This top that I'm wearing at the moment is 100% polyester, and this is made of fossil fuels. This is made from oil, effectively, and this will never rot. So this garment. So we've got to find a way. There's lots and lots and lots of polyester garments in the world, and various other iterations of synthetic fabrics. And so we've got to find a way of taking this polyester garment and making it into another garment, instead of throwing it into landfill or burning it, which is what happens to it at the moment generally. I mean, there is a certain amount of reuse that happens, but a lot of fabrics do find their way into landfill and into incineration. So from a consumer's point of view, try and buy 100% of anything fabric, because that's eventually going to be able to be reused, remade into new. To try and buy the best quality that you possibly can, or that you can afford, because that will last longer. And the longer you own a garment and the more use it gets, it reduces down its carbon footprint, because the carbon footprint of a garment, the majority of the carbon footprint is actually in the manufacture. And as you know from your days in the textile business, the supply chain for garments is hugely long and complex, from producing the fabric to finishing the fabric to making it into yarn to making it into fabric to then making it, dyeing it, transporting it. Like, it's a hugely complex supply chain now. So therefore, that's where a lot of the carbon is used. And then if you can extend the life of that garment, then you're going to reduce the amount of carbon footprint that it has. Buy secondhand. There's an awful lot of, I mean, I have to say, I speak for the charity shop world, where obviously we want everybody to go and buy in charity shops, but they are the original circular economy. Like, charity shops have been around since the middle of the 20th century, and they've been sustainable long before that word even existed in that context. But there's lots and lots of commercial retailers now who are getting into the rental, into selling, reselling, that you can take goods back to, you can take garments back that you've bought with them before, and they will resell it onto somebody else. So all these new ways, it's not about necessarily making it less profitable for retailers. It's just a different way of thinking about it, and taking a different approach to how you view the product that you've got. So instead of the old linear model, which is take, make, and waste. So we extract the resources from the ground or from the soil. We make something out of it. It goes into distribution. It goes to a shop. When we're finished with it, we throw it away. Whereas the circular economy is where those resources are kept in the loop as much as possible. So there's only a very small amount of residual waste. I mean, the circular economy, I could spend another half an hour talking about it, but that's effectively what it is. So if you think about it in those terms, so it's seeing what you have, everything you have is a resource. So there is no waste. What we have is materials that we need to try and keep in use as much as for as long as possible. So at the moment, reuse is a big thing, but we've got to find a way of actually taking the resources that we do have and making new stuff out of them. When you think about the number of mobile phones that are sitting in people's drawers all over the world, billions and billions, and you think of all the materials in those mobile phones, all of the, precious metals and minerals that are in those phones, we're actually having to mine virgin. If we actually took all of the materials out of all those mobile phones, we could make new ones. We don't need to mine new minerals in order to do that, So, and the plastic, of course, that's in them as well can be reused. So there's lots of things whereby you can think about, once you start thinking about things in a circular way, then it's really interesting how it then can inform how you consume. And retailers have to respond to that movement and that desire in their consumers to want to be more circular.
So definitely, I think reusing what you have, you said there, and just looking at what you can do within your own means. And I think that what you touched on there, it is the small everyday things. And even I worked at a brand before, and we had one specialist in that region that looked at energy costs, and it was as simple as people leaving the bathroom light on all day. It was as simple as, and even sorting the rubbish in the canteen out. So it was really, little things like that we can implement. What is your kind of vision, I suppose? So you've Green Zebra started now. What would your vision be of this? Because obviously you've built this, you've this amazing 7-pillar program. Where do you see this going, or where do you see that vision?
I suppose my vision is that every business would look at what they do and see what they can do to contribute to stop contributing to global warming, and to stop as I said, stop chucking the greenhouse gases up in the atmosphere. And I think that every business has got the potential to do that.
Mm,
And I think and I suppose where I'm coming from is
mm,
trying to meet businesses where they are, to say, okay, it's fine. We know, I know we've done all this for decades, but we are where we are now,
mm,
and we've now got to take this forward. So my vision would be is that every business really addresses the issue and really looks at it from, what am I doing and where can I start? But more importantly, where do I want my business to be in 5 or 10 years' time? What's it going to look like? Who are my customers going to be? Where am I going to get my products from? If energy is going to carry on being as uncertain as it is, which it looks like it is, like, because we haven't got enough renewables at the moment to replace the fossil fuels, and yet we need to stop using the fossil fuels. So there's going to be another sort of 5 years or so where prices are going to be really up and down, and it's going to be really, it's not going to be very certain. So, how am I going to cope with that? What does that mean for my business? How am I going to look at my energy consumption and how I use energy both downstream, like, coming into my business from my suppliers, and where I source all my products from, and then upstream, which is, how am I using my energy and how can I change that? And how can I reduce that? But it's not just energy, it's looking at the way in which you do business. And business as usual is not going to work anymore, and the last 2 years of the pandemic have shown us that so visibly, that things that we took for certainties and was, nothing was going to change, and all of a sudden it did. So, the combination of the pandemic and climate change, I think, should force every business to start really looking at where they want their business to be in 5 years' time, and what's their business going to look like. What are the products they're going to sell? What are the services they're going to sell? And who are their customers going to be? And if they start asking those really fundamental questions, instead of saying, well, I've always sold to this cohort, or, for the last 5 years, my sales have been this, you can't look back, you can't look at what's happened in the past and expect that to be there for the future, because that's not going to happen anymore.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that approach, as you said there, is topical in everyone's mind. I think especially with COVID, even pre-COVID, there was a big focus on it. And I think before we even spoke about customers are asking now, and even with that new emerging workforce, people are more mindful of where their products are sourced, and sourcing locally is a big focus, I think, as well. You make it, you do have a way of breaking it down and having it more simple for retailers to understand that, because I do think, Linda, it's with sustainability previously, it was felt like it was maybe maybe the larger multinationals looked at those, but I think small retailers will benefit looking at those processes in their businesses, as you said, from a cost saving perspective, and also supporting in that and contributing to that, even from their local community, because we're seeing a lot of businesses now are really, it's more community led, even if you do have multinational in a local, if you've a large chain store, they're still really getting involved in the community, be it the GAA, be it local charities, whatever that is. So there is that feel that people now are looking at bricks and mortar retailers, not just they're selling product on a shelf, but they're there contributing to that local economy and local community around them through those different things. Where can people find you? So your business is Green Zebra, and you touched on there that you have your 7-pillar course. It started already. And if businesses do want to get involved in your program, Linda, where does it best to reach you, on your website or LinkedIn, or where's the best?
Well, either really. The website is greenzebra.io. And on the website, you'll find lots and lots of information about the program. We also have a lot of free tools on the website, and you can engage with all of those. We're actually in the middle of producing an ebook at the moment, which we hope will be a real sort of pointer for people to be able to pick up one document and say, right, okay, here's the 8 pillars. This is what they're all about, and this is where I start. So the ebook will be coming out in May. And really, and as I said, if anybody wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, then you'll find me you'll find me there under Linda Ward. So yeah, really, that the website's probably the best place to start. That's where a lot of the resources are, most definitely. And if anybody, the 8-pillar program that you described there, we've got 3 cohorts starting each year. So we've just started one in March now. The next one will be in June, and the next one will be in October. So if anybody's interested in joining us in June, please get in touch. I'd be delighted to talk to anybody. We do a pro bono program as well for charities and not-for-profits. So if you're a charity or a not-for-profit and you're interested in coming on the course, we provide one place free at every intake for those people. And in fact, we've got 2 on our first intake. We've got 2 charities on our first intake at the moment that are working with us. And that's really, we're trying to live, we're not trying, we are living the values that we espouse. So that whole community and giving back thing, that's part of what we're doing. And we're also part of 1% for the Planet, which means that we will donate 1% of our turnover each year to environmental projects around the world, and that's through an organization called 1% for the Planet. So I'd really encourage any business out there who really wants to give back to have a look at it. It's a fantastic organization. It was set up by Yves Chouinard, who's the founder of Patagonia, and it's a fantastic organization, and it's a really, I say, easy way for companies to give back, but it's certainly a really what's the word? It's a very ethical and sustainable way for companies to show that they are concerned about the planet, and that will only help in terms of all the things we talked about. It'll get traction with your customers, and it will also get traction with your potential employees.
It's amazing, Linda. And thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And I think it's given people a really good insight and a taster for what that looks like in their retail business and how they can, get involved and for it to be, it's small things like you said there, and bringing those into the forefront and the benefits of it. So thank you so much. I'll have all of the links underneath this recording, and reach out to Linda. Linda's really approachable. I've spoken to Linda. I met her through LinkedIn. So definitely reach out. She is an absolute expert in the sustainability piece, and I'm one of those people out there that you definitely want to reach out to and have a conversation with, because she'll enlighten you for sure. Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Louise. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.